Hey, so for my presentation, I chose apraxia of speech, apraxia intervention, and to start off, I chose to discuss what is apraxia. The main takeaway from this slide is basically that apraxia is a motor programming disorder. It's not something caused by a cognitive issue. It's not the result of a cognitive issue. It's not due to weakness or paralysis of the speech muscles. It's not a delay that you can just simply work toward catching up to and overcompensate with therapy and then catch up to a certain milestone. It's something that therapy is there to help and is needed most of the time. It basically has to do with the brain pathways involved in planning the sequence of movement involved in production. So your brain knows what it wants to say, it just cannot get the muscles, or I guess it's kind of like a plug trying to go into a socket. It's not going right in, like at night when you're trying to put that plug in when your phone charger unplugged. It's due to motor programming. So symptoms and diagnosis, I felt like this was important because you should know what are some of the symptoms and what is it that usually entails diagnosing it. But the biggest takeaway from this slide is inconsistency and errors. That's one of the big indicators, one of the big flags, red flags of, hey, this is possibly apraxia that you're dealing with. Typically with like an articulation disorder or any other type of disorder, there's a consistency with the way an error is occurring. So for example, if you're fronting, you're constantly going to be making that, instead of the G, the D, or instead of the K, the T, you're constantly doing that same error. With apraxia, it's going to be inconsistent. So when the child may try to say a word, it may sound one way the first time. The second time, it might sound like a completely different word. That was my biggest takeaway from this slide. And then on the treatment, I did mention, how often treatment is, what type of goals you want to work toward, but mainly on this slide, the approaches that were listed on the ASHA website were motor programming approaches, linguistic approaches, combination of these, and then rhythmic prosodic approaches. Here I'm going to discuss the motor programming approaches, the examples. The examples of motor programming approaches were the dynamic, temporal, and tactile cueing, DTTC. It's an integral stimulation. You want to look at the look, it focuses on the look, listen, do what I do type of method that uses cueing hierarchy. That's auditory, visual, and tactile cueing, and systematically decreases support as the child achieves success at each level of the cueing hierarchy. So movement gestures are shaped, beginning with direct imitation, moving to simultaneous production with tactile or just gestural cues. If direct imitation is unsuccessful, then fading this simultaneous cue and again moving to direct imitation. The key element of this approach is that the clinician is constantly adding or fading auditory, visual, and tactile cues as needed after each practice trial. It is suggested for very young children with severe childhood apraxia. So basically what this is just saying is that with DTTC, you're focusing on hey, I'm going to model, I'm going to show you how to do this, and then we're going to work toward doing it together. And this whole time you're focusing on providing very specific cueing, whether it be auditory, visual, and tactile. You want to make sure that you're being very specific instead of just saying, hey, make sure your tongue is touching the roof of your mouth. You want to get specific and say, you want to feel this specific part of the mouth, or make sure that you're making this specific shape with your lips. You want to be as specific as possible. The other type of motor programming example that's provided is the Newfield Dyspraxia program in DP3. It's a motor skills learning approach that emphasizes motor programming skills and focuses on speech output. It's described as a bottom-up approach in which the aim is to build accurate speech from core units of single speech sounds, such as phonemes and simple syllables. New motor programs are established during cues and feedback through frequent practice and repetitive sequencing exercises. Phonological skills are incorporated into the treatment approach through the use of minimal word pairs. The other type of motor programming approach is the rapid syllable transitions. Something that you'll notice with apraxia is that a lot of the approaches are very repetitive, a lot of repetition, and it's going to be like somewhat intensive, if that makes sense. So with the rapid syllable transitions, or REST, it's a method that involves repetition of varied sequences of real or nonsense syllables to train motor planning flexibility. It uses intensive practice in producing multisyllabic, phonotactically permissible pseudo words to improve accuracy of speech, sound production, rapid and fluent transition from one sound or syllable to the next, and control of syllable stress within words. Pseudo words are used to allow the development and practice of new speech patterns without interference from existent error speech patterns. Now, the other type of approach is the linguistic approaches. Linguistic approaches focus on speech function. They target speech sounds, groups of sounds with similar patterns of error, in an effort to help the child internalize phonological rules. Something that was said on the website, the actual website, is that it's important to note that linguistic approaches are intended as a complement to motoric approaches, not as a replacement for them. So the examples of linguistic approaches that were provided were the cycles approach. It's a linguistic approach that targets phonological pattern errors. It is designed for children whose speech is highly unintelligible, who have extensive omissions and substitutions, and restricted use of consonants. The goal is to increase intelligibility within a short period of time. Treatment is scheduled in cycles ranging from 5 to 6 weeks. During each cycle, the SLP targets one or more phonological patterns. After each cycle is completed, another cycle begins that targets one or more different phonological patterns. Recycling of the phonological patterns continues until the targeted patterns are present in the child's spontaneous speech. The goal is approximate, gradual, typical phonological development process. The other type of linguistic approach is the IPA, Integrated Phonological Awareness, and it's designed to simultaneously facilitate phonological awareness, letter sound knowledge, and speech production in preschool and young school-age children with speech and language impairment. Specific approaches to facilitate the development of phonological awareness include developing knowledge that positively influence phonological awareness development, such as teaching nursery rhymes. What kid doesn't like a nursery rhyme or song? And focusing on sound properties of spoken language. And also integrating phonological awareness activities into the treatment sessions, such as phoneme awareness and letter game activities. So those are the linguistic approaches, and you also have the prosodic facilitation. Prosodic facilitation listed one type of example, the melodic indentation therapy. It's a prosodic facilitation approach that uses singing, rhythmic speech, and rhythmic hand tapping to train functional phrases and sentences. Using these techniques, the clinician guides the individual through a gradual progression of steps that increase the length of utterances, decreases dependencies on the clinician, and decrease reliance on intonation. We also have the augmentative and alternative communication. It involves supplementing or replacing natural speech or writing with aided symbols such as picture communication, line drawings, bliss symbols, speech generating devices, and tangible objects, or an aided symbol such as manual signs, gestures, and finger spelling. And also, I wanted to incorporate considerations for bilinguals and multilinguals. Something that was obviously bilingual treatment showed greater improvement than just doing English only. You wanted to target phonemes shared by both languages, and you wanted to select stimulus targets that affect both languages and result in cross-linguistic transfer of skills. Something that I thought was interesting was also that children may appear to show preference for speaking in one language, but that could be just because of the easier motor task associated with that specific language. So it shouldn't deter you from trying to include both languages rather than just one. And these are my citations, and thank you very much.